open up with a little mindfulness exercise too, Svanika, if you're into that. You know,
Uh, a little what? Sorry.
just a little bit of like a centering mindfulness kind of 1 minute meditation to kind of bring us all into the same digital space here.
Yeah, sounds fun.
Right?
Definitely.
Thanks for joining us. All right. Are we good to go here? I'm going to give it, I'm going to give this like 1 more minute. You know, a lot of us are on California time, which means you're either on time or 15 minutes late, which means a half hour from on time.
Very much like Indian Standard Time.
Yeah. Is it kind of just a flow? Here, see
Oh
here.
yeah, very much so. In Indian time, on time means you're half an hour late. And it was the same. So I grew up in the Middle East, and the Middle East was also very, very laid back, right? Like if something got done, it'd be like inshallah, and then it would mean it was getting done like a while from then. So very laid back cultures, yeah.
All right. Someone else is live streaming to his Twitch community. We're just getting in here. For anyone that's joining on Instagram, I'm interviewing one of our partners. She's on Zoom. We'll send this out later, but do you want to get started, Svanika? Yeah?
Let's do it. Sounds great.
All right. So thanks for joining, everyone. I'm Brian, founder of Medicine Box. I've noticed some of these names up here are familiar. Before we start with this wonderful interview we have today, I wanted to try a little bit of a mindfulness exercise with everybody. I'm super into breath work and meditation daily. And my morning meditation today, I was thinking about what I was going to speak about with Svanika today. And I always reference meditation to being in a raft in the middle of the ocean. So if everyone can close their eyes, we're going to do a little breath work, and then I'm going to guide you into a little bit of a meditation. We're going to inhale 4 seconds. We're going to hold for 4 seconds, and then we're going to exhale for 4 seconds. We're going to do 3 rounds of that. I'll guide you right now, starting in 3, 2, 1. Inhale for 4 seconds. Hold for 4. And exhale 4. 2 more times. Inhale. Hold for 4. Exhale 4. Inhale. Hold. Exhale for 4. Now, with everyone's eyes shut, imagine yourselves in the middle of the ocean, just drifting away on your flotation device, raft, life preserver, whatever it may be, and all those waves are just floating on by you. Those are your thoughts and your emotions. Just let them just go right on by. And that flotation device is your center, your eyes closed. That's your meditation practice. That's what I always attribute it to. However, as you're floating by in safety, there's waves that are going by. And unfortunately, many of those waves have plastic in them in our oceans. So let the wave flow by, but remember to take action and grab the plastic, bring it into your raft, and properly dispose of it. Now that's the theme of what we're going to speak about today. And I'd like to introduce you all. Y'all can keep your eyes closed or join us on the Zoom. And today I'd like to introduce the CEO, the wonderful Svanika Balasubramanian. I think I got it right. Of rePurpose Global. And she is a Forbes 30 under 30 for the work that she's doing on a global environmental stewardship program of a fantastic, grandiose, obtainable vision of removing as much plastic from the oceans around the world and our planet through her startup's efforts. And Medicine Box has very gratefully been able to partner with them. And the reason why, a big reason why that Medicine Box, partnered with rePurpose was, much of my own personal values, living in Lake Tahoe, being an environmental studies major in college, and just also being a steward of the environment, and seeing the amount of plastic that is consumed one time, thrown away, and not always getting in the proper receptacles. And then being in the cannabis industry, there is a, pretty much a plastic pandemic in the cannabis industry, with the childproof packaging, the exit packaging that comes out of dispensaries, and then a grander, sector of the, CPG, consumer packaged goods brands out there. And we all consume plastic, no matter how intentional and conscious we can be. And being in a developed country like the United States, California, fifth largest economy in the world, much of our plastic that we use here gets packed up and, unbeknownst to many of us, sent over to developing countries and third world countries. Out of sight, out of mind, let someone else deal with it. But how can business and brands like Medicine Box help contribute and make an impact and do the environment well, while healing ourselves? We're healing the earth, and our mission statement is creating sovereignty in human health and happiness while harmonizing our relationship with Mother Earth. So this is a perfect platform for that. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Svanika, and I have some questions that I'm going to ask her, and we can get to know the mission that rePurpose is on, and the fantastic person that is at the helm. So welcome, Svanika, all the way over in sunny, tropical Toronto, Canada. I think a very good place to start, kick us off here, is tell us about the business model and the organization of rePurpose.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Brian. It's really wonderful to be here, and always great to speak more about what we're doing and kind of spread the impact. So thank you everybody for joining us as well. So yeah, my name is Svanika. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO at rePurpose Global, and we are the world's first plastic credit platform. So essentially what we're doing is building one of the world's largest networks of plastic recovery projects around the world. Everything from, really cool innovations that are providing material alternatives to plastic, all the way to extensive holistic supply chains that are able to stop plastic from leaking out into nature, out into our oceans in the first place. And our flagship product is the Plastic Neutral certification, where essentially we help CPG brands and businesses around the world measure their plastic footprint and then fund the removal of an equivalent amount from the environment through one of our projects on the ground. So that's kind of us in short. short, and I'm excited to go into more detail about what we do as the conversation progresses.
Mm-hmm. One of my questions is, as a founder myself, is going from idea to inception to execution. And how did rePurpose Global go from this huge idea into a business? And when did you start?
That's a great question. Also, a very broad question. So I was thinking a little bit about it earlier today, actually, because I would honestly put the inception of rePurpose at almost exactly to the day 3 years ago. So this was back when I was in college, and I was in this honors program where I had to write a thesis. And at that point, I was writing my thesis on the economics of refugee resettlement in Germany. And a very interesting kind of concept at that, like a very Wharton concept, very economics oriented. And it was just very, I think, fateful, very serendipitous, because I happened to be paired as a peer reviewer for Peter, who ended up becoming my co-founder. And Peter Yemdahl, he's, Chinese Norwegian, and he was writing about slums in urban Mumbai that were doing informal waste management, which I found to be absolutely fascinating, because I didn't myself, didn't know much about the topic, and I thought it was really, really interesting. And so we got to talking, one thing led to the other, and I decided to co-write that thesis with him. And that's around the same time that my third co-founder came on board as well. And rePurpose really started as an academic initiative at that, where we were trying to investigate this kind of core problem of why 91% of our plastic waste doesn't get recycled, even if it is recyclable. And then the majority of it ends up, leaking out into nature, into our oceans. And exactly as Brian mentioned, it gets shipped halfway across the world to places like India and Indonesia, Vietnam, the Philippines, and so on, they're really drowning in the plastic that everybody else is producing. And what we're doing is really kind of, it's really exporting away pollution, right? And that's what we did. So we spent almost a year kind of embedded on the ground into these waste management networks, in going quite literally, I guess, and figuratively, from dumping ground to landfill to dumping ground across South America, Africa, and Asia, really understanding what the problem looked like, not in these kind of like fancy cushy apartments, but really on the ground, what was happening there. And I think at the end of it, we had this 200, 300 page paper that just didn't seem enough, because the problem was just so massive. And then once you've stood in the middle of a dumping ground with like these towers, mountains of waste rising up on either side of you, and the flies buzzing and the people picking waste, it just doesn't seem like, you can go back and write a paper and then be done with it. And then so I think that was kind of when the first idea of rePurpose started to happen. And I think the first kind of a big innovation, I think the aha moment for us, was this concept of plastic credits, where we essentially said, can we borrow from the carbon space? A lot of you must know about carbon credits, right? This really, I think, revolutionary concept that was able to unlock a lot of private sector funding, and use that funding to kind of scale up and capitalize solutions that combat climate change. And we said, can we do the same thing, but for plastic? Because there are so many amazing innovators, amazing waste management enterprises on the ground that are just cash strapped, that just need kind of financing to scale up the wonderful work that they're already doing. And so we spent a long time and eventually kind of created the first plastic credit platform, where all of a sudden, impact had become accessible, where anybody anywhere in the world could come in and say, hey, I have this $1, and if I put this $1 into the platform, tangibly 4 additional pounds of plastic waste can be removed from the environment. And this is done through kind of all of the different projects we have on the ground that are systemically building holistic kind of infrastructural solutions to keep plastic out of the environment. That was kind of, I guess, the growth, like from the idea stage to kind of, okay, conceptually, what can we do with plastic credits? And then the final step was then saying, okay, now we have plastic credits. How do we get people to participate in it, right? How do we get people interested? How do we get businesses interested? And that's where we came up with the plastic neutral certification, which was, I think by a lot of sense spurred by this amazing consumer awareness and interest in the space, right? Where in the last 5-6 years, we've been seeing sustainable products are growing 500, 600% faster than regular products, because people are voting with their dollars, and people are saying that we want products that are good for the environment, good for the world, and not just about the profit line. And so there was all this kind of, I think, awareness and need from brands to do something about their plastic footprint. And so the plastic neutral certification is essentially this kind of accessible way for them to participate. And that's exactly, and then Brian can tell you more about how Medicine Box is doing it, but essentially kind of saying, okay, this is my plastic footprint. I'm going to measure it, and I'm going to fund the removal of an equivalent amount, so essentially purchase an equivalent amount of plastic credits to offset my own footprint as kind of a starting point in my sustainability journey. And so we launched the plastic neutral certification about 10 months ago now, I want to say, and it's been kind of a massive revolution that I think it sparked. We have businesses all over the world and in every major continent across pretty much every sector that's participating here. So it's been a pretty, I think, rewarding, grueling journey going from that landfill 3 years ago to kind of where we are today.
I think this would be a good time to actually show some examples of what the type of plastic that we're talking about, and the plastic neutral and program and credits, and taking one of those BFPs, a big fucking problem, and dealing with it. And that's exactly what rePurpose has done, but macro, and then coming down to more of a micro level. And I actually have examples here all the way. So she spoke of the plastic neutrality program. So part of what Medicine Box had to do was, it was a lot of work, and I was happy to do the work, but was literally way out the plastic that we use. And for everyone that knows Medicine Box, we sell sublingual tinctures, and this is the tincture dropper. This is a glass pipette, but this topper here, no one would probably guess that weighs 4.5 grams. So what I did, I took this off, I weighed it out, multiplied it by 1,000, and came up with, it was something around 45 pounds. I went all the way back through the supply chain, and this is all that low value plastic that doesn't get recycled. This is a piece of tape that goes across a box that these tinctures and tincture droppers come in. This is the plastic wrapper that wraps up thousands of these. This is the heavier plastic that goes around the bottles that's in the box, okay? And then y'all know this stuff, this bubble nuisance bubble wrap. No judging, this is from Amazon, but we know what in here, more bubble wrap, okay? And we use this similar, I couldn't find the actual wrap, but we use a similar package for when someone orders our product and it gets shipped out. I didn't stop there. If anyone is in the cannabis industry, you know that cannabis is stored in these vacuum seal bags. These are freezer bags that you can store food in. The cannabis industry, the hemp industry has capitalized, or Food Saver has capitalized on the cannabis and hemp industry. And this is super heavy plastic, even heavier than that other piece I showed you. I didn't stop there. I went all the way back through the supply chain, that every 1 pound of hemp flour is usually wrapped in a turkey bag, and that is 17 grams. I didn't stop there. I went into my house. I use about 4 of these a month for my recycle. And then these are the heavy 6 mil contractor bags that every cannabis and hemp farm uses, because it can fit 20 pounds of whole flour in there wrapped in those turkey bags. So even though we aren't vertically integrated, I was able to figure out the amount of material in cannabis form that goes into those 1,000 tinctures that we sell, I think once a quarter that we calculated. So kind of went above and beyond, added a little bit of my own, household trash, the things that I use for my business. And that is how we calculated the amount of plastic that we are actually putting out into the world. And when you do that, it's a little bit embarrassing, even as much, as many conscious, outsourcing of materials that you can find, there's just always plastic. And you mentioned what, 91%, Svanika? That's a lot if you think about that. So now that you all know and have an idea of what the Plastic Neutrality, Plastic Negative program is about from the brand standpoint, Svanika, why don't you tell us how you actually come up with those measurables and how they feed directly into the plastic pickers for jobs, and then where that plastic actually goes after it gets sorted through.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. Before, I tell you guys more about the impact projects themselves, I want to kind of stress a little bit on this concept of additionality. So every plastic credit that we put out into the world comes with something quite unique, this 100% additionality guarantee from us, which is this idea that if we had not recovered or processed that piece of plastic, it would have otherwise sat in that ocean, sat in that landfill, sat in that dumping ground for decades to come, had it not been for the express intervention financed by the brand that we're working with. So what that really does is forces us never to subsidize the status quo, but rather to always invest in kind of solutions that are more for the long term, and not just kind of like a band-aid for today, so to speak. And so this 100% additionality guarantee then means that the very, very first step that we do with any of our projects is a baseline assessment. So right now we have projects across 3 different continents, so we have projects in Colombia, Kenya, Ghana, Indonesia, across, India, several countries really around the world that have very different baselines, right? Like what the situation on the ground looks like is always different from country to country, but even within a country, it's different, like coastal India looks very different from rural, which looks very, very different from like urban India. So the first thing that we do is kind of map that out, right? A comprehensive kind of understanding of like, so this is what's happening on the ground today, and this is what's formal and this is what's informal. So formal waste management, I think, like that's what we're used to, kind of the municipal kind of collection, door-to-door collection and segregation and so on. But in the majority of the world, a lot of waste management is informal, and about 2% of the world's poorest people today work in waste management, and they're stuck in kind of this very inherently exploitative industry with no regulation, that has a lot of cyclical poverty traps that keeps them kind of just going within that same industry, and the children going within that same industry as waste workers, as kind of waste pickers in these landfills and so on. And then so the first thing that we do is map all of this out, and then we build interventions to say, okay, right now this is the amount of plastic being removed from the environment. We're going to build an intervention that elevates it to this level, and that delta in between is essentially what becomes plastic credits, and then what we kind of then attribute to Medicine Box, to kind of the brands that we work with around the world. And so depending on kind of what the baselines are, the interventions look a little bit different. And I'll give you I guess 2 examples, just to give you kind of the spectrum of things that we work with. In one of the examples, let's take Kenya, right? So something like one of the things that Brian was showing was polypropylene. And then so thermoform polypropylene has a pretty high recovery rate in places like India and Indonesia, but had a very, very low recovery rate in Nairobi, Kenya. And it was not because it wasn't being recovered, right? At face value, you can think, oh, maybe it's just not being collected, and that's what you need to finance. But the real reason there was that there was no PP recycling plant in Nairobi, Kenya. So like, even if you recovered it, where's it going to go, right? So the clear gap in that waste management chain was in the infrastructure. It was kind of an infrastructural gap. So our partners, so we work with kind of waste management partners on the ground. So Taka Taka was able to build, I think, one of East Africa's very first thermoform PP recycling plant, when all of a sudden you have an end market, right? You have somewhere for the plastic to get collected, to get recycled, and then sold on to the manufacturers. So these are kind of some of the infrastructural type interventions that we are able to do. And on the flip side of it, on kind of the other side, Brian spoke a little bit about the LVPs, right? The low value plastic. These are the kind of plastic that never get collected anywhere in the world, right? Because they have, they can't be recycled in a lot of instances, and they have very low recyclable or like kind of economic value. So the free market kind of, the capitalist way of thinking, they would never collect it because there's no profit to collecting it. And so in Colombia, we work with this association of recyclers. I think, it's basically a waste worker cooperative where the waste workers kind of work together, and they go and then we kind of use plastic credits to provide that financial incentive that is missing in the private market, that is missing in the free market, for these workers to collect the low value plastic. So everything like your wrappers, your chips packets, your Oreo packets, those kinds of things, they collect it and they bring it back to the facilities, get it processed, get it sorted. And what we're able to do in Colombia is actually kind of, we work with a service provider there where the plastic is kind of mushed into bricks. It's processed and it gets hardened, and they make bricks out of it. And the waste workers are able to build houses with the same bricks that they're collecting. So it's a very nice kind of circular, holistic story over there that we're able to kind of, impact that we're able to create. So really a wide spectrum of different projects depending on the baselines that we're doing. But across the board, the focus is always on these two key things, right? Where every plastic credit is removing additional amounts of plastic from the environment that otherwise would not have been. And in doing so, also having some sort of socioeconomic impact, some sort of social impact, because we're creating jobs and we're formalizing jobs and giving kind of the baseline, right? The minimum fair wages at the very, very least, and then kind of financial inclusion, healthcare, paid benefits, and so on and so forth for a lot of these workers that have never seen anything like that for a long, long time. And so you're able to kind of really kind of say there's intersectional impact here, because I really do think I'm a huge believer in that one does not exist without the other, right? We can never think about impact in silos. All of the different kind of pieces always work together. So yeah, that's a little bit of an kind of overview of how these different things play out.
Thank you for explaining that. So just, just to kind of, summarize that, is there are plastic pickers that take the LVP, and you're also providing jobs for people in facilities that have been built for the LVP to actually go somewhere else in the form of building materials. And that's what Taka Taka is. So Taka Taka is our, impact partner that we got partnered with in Kenya. And how do you go about, partnering on the brand side with the impact partners, through rePurpose?
So just to clarify, Brian, you mean how are brands kind of connected with an impact partner?
Yeah. How do you go about that process of, connecting, the brands that you're working with the impact partner?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good, I think that's where I have fun with it. I think it's an interesting math problem, right? So essentially we have an impact team that goes and then kind of like onboards these projects, right? We look around the world, we kind of evaluate, and then we look at what are the kind of partners out there, what are the types of impact projects out there that are having like really cool additionality, right? That are doing great stuff, but just need funding to scale, where the gap is not political in nature, it's not kind of like anything else, but they just are kind of like funding bootstrap. And then we work with them, and then onboard them onto the platform. And then we kind of say, okay, these projects are ready to generate plastic credits. And then that's kind of the supply, if you will. And on the other side, we then kind of have all these businesses that come in and say, okay, this is our plastic footprint. We want to offset it. We want to do something about it. And that's kind of the demand piece of it. And sometimes when we have really, really big, massive projects, we work with like Colgate, for example, Vita Coco, Google, and so on. And all of these are massive projects. And so we're able to kind of create new infrastructure, new supply chains that are like much bigger just for that brand, and kind of connected directly. In other cases, when we work with like, and our kind of big, when we did this to make impact accessible. And we never wanted to say, hey, you have to be a minimum order size to come on board the platform. So we have everybody from like literally an individual who can say, I want to offset 1 kilogram of plastic, all the way up to the tons and tons level, right? So when we have the small, medium enterprises, we're able to batch them together. And essentially, typically we give options, right? We say, hey, these are the projects we have right now that we can go ahead and finance. Which one do you guys like? And so then Medicine Box chose Taka Taka, for example. I think, Brian, I think the options there were Carpe and Taka Taka, if I remember right, Carpe in India, and Taka Taka in Kenya. And so when the brand chooses that, then we're able to kind of then batch, a few different projects together and then go ahead and enact the intervention on the ground, which is really where you kind of have this platform approach, right? Where we say, okay, now we have all collectively with these 3 brands, 3 tons of plastic or 30 tons of plastic that we're going to be recovering. And then we go ahead and then do kind of the work on the ground based on that. So it's really kind of I think, holistic platform approach that we take to doing that.
Thank you. I love that you're using environmental stewardship, environmental responsibility, but you're also creating social responsibility and inclusion as well. That's a big key point here, where on the surface level, you just say, oh, they're just removing plastic from the oceans, but there's a much bigger vision in that supply chain. And leading me to my next question, and you kind of answered most of it, but who are your, ideal clients and partners? It sounds like you have, people all the way down that just want to make an individual effort all the way up to, Google and Colgate. So it sounds like you do not discriminate on who you choose.
Yeah, and it's really about the intent, right? People who want to make a difference. I think we started with plastic, but my personal, but like just generally, the rePurpose big vision is making impact accessible. Because for the longest time, there was always this, I think, disconnect between what happened on the ground and the impact creators and the wonderful work that they were doing, and then what like brands did and what kind of companies did or individuals did. And there was no way that someone, in Colorado in like, Lake Tahoe, producing kind of cannabis products is able to kind of connect with someone in Bali, Indonesia, or like, I guess, Kenya, who's doing something really, really cool over there. And then, there's not that kind of common connection. And so for us, it's really about saying, hey, we will play the role of being that ecosystem enabler, where we'll bring all of these kind of actors to the table. And ultimately, all we're doing is making impact accessible, right? Because every kilogram counts, every pound counts. At the end of the day, like it might seem like, oh, this is just 1 pound or 1 kilogram, but that's equivalent to 40 PET bottles, right, out there in the ocean, and out there in the lakes and out there in nature. And then so, yeah, we don't kind of look at how small you are, how big you are, where you are in the world. The intent is really progress. And then so, participating in the ecosystem is open to anybody who comes in with the right intent and the right kind of motivation to create progress.
I like what you said there, ecosystem enabler. Could you drop into that a little bit? Like, what's your definition of an ecosystem enabler, or the philosophy behind that?
Yeah, a little bit of like kind of what I was saying really, where the ecosystem I think has so many different actors, right? You have the impact creators on the ground, you have the scientists and the professors who are doing these baseline assessments and have like a very academic angle of like what is happening on the ground. And then you have the entrepreneurs, kind of the waste management entrepreneurs, and then you have the informal workers, the waste workers who are already for decades have been doing things. Like I met somebody, and it's, I always remember them. The one of the first people that I met when I was in Mumbai, for example, was this man. He was about 45 years of age, and he could close his eyes, and you could hand him a piece of waste, and he could like tell if it was one of 45 different types of plastic just by like touching it, because he'd
Wow.
been like working on this for so long, and he could do it with his eyes closed, right? And then so there are these kinds of workers who have been doing something for a long time. They know how to do it right, but they just haven't been given the right resources to kind of go forward from there. And then you have kind of, on the other side, you have the brands, and you have people like you, and then people, everybody listening in today, who are interested and who want to participate, but just don't know how, right? Just don't know kind of, okay, what is the best way to do it? Where do I put my money to make sure that I get like tangible, verifiable, transparent amounts of impact that again has that kind of like bang for buck, right? The most amount of impact for every dollar I put in. There's so many actors, I think, that kind of like combine here. And all I guess, we do ultimately is make sure that everybody is able to participate and be the best versions of themselves, right? Do what they really want to do, and then get kind of come together to push things forward. But yeah, so I guess that's why we think of
Yeah.
ourselves as an
Uh,
ecosystem enabler.
I asked that question because I'm a big fan of permaculture, and permaculture is permanent culture, and it's very much based on 12 principles. You've touched on a lot of the principles of permaculture here, and it's a closed loop holistic system that is really, working with what we have, work with nature, not against it. And we've put a lot of that messaging into the brand identity of Medicine Box. And Medicine Box is based on 7 pillars, but nature being one of them, as this evolving medium that is in constant flux, it's in constant change. And as humans doing good work here, it's up to us to be good stewards of the environment. We're only guests on this planet. And just to finish off here, kind of a 2-part question. Um, like any good startup with a big vision and doing some solid work, there's always problems on the micro level and macro level. Like, what do you think is your biggest challenge that you're facing right now? Current state of rePurpose. What is, if you're at liberty to talk about that? And then the second part of that question would be to kind of tailor it off of, what is the future for rePurpose, and then, the planet, kind of some big picture stuff.
Yeah, wow, the future for the planet. I don't know if I'm the I have all the right expertise to talk about the future for the planet, but yeah, so I guess the first question, which is what is the big challenge for rePurpose? I think it's really kind of just spreading awareness, spreading education around this topic. Because the way I think about it, if we had gone ahead and started a company that sells ice cream, for example, right? We would just have to say, hey, we are the best ice cream out there, and here's why you should work with us, right? But now imagine if nobody knew what ice cream tasted like, and then you had to like explain to them, okay, this is why ice cream is good, and then this is why you should work with us. And in a sense, that's kind of how plastic credits are, right? Because it's a difficult concept to understand a little bit, for the businesses, and it's quite a radically new way of doing things, and I think that's why we did it as well, right? We wanted to be radically new about kind of, because the old solutions have existed for 20, 30 years and they haven't gone too far. And so we wanted kind of new solutions that could take us a little bit further. But I think always, with that comes the kind of education pieces of it. But we are seeing, good things happen as more and more people are seeing kind of the plastic neutral stamp on the products. They're starting to recognize it, and then kind of more brands are starting to appreciate it and recognize it. And it's becoming kind of a very unified, cohesive kind of language that people understand. So yeah, I guess that's that's a little bit on that side of things. And then the other question, I guess, which was the future of the planet, I think I'm extremely optimistic. Um, I think I'm optimistic because I have to be. I think we all have to be, and it's easy to be cynical and it's easy to be pessimistic. It's harder to be optimistic, but I think there's so much, I think, being done around every major SDG level. And then as you go more into the industry, as you work with more players, there are so many, I think, amazing innovations, amazing efforts on the macro level by people like the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, or kind of these big financial institution things around blue bonds and green bonds and ocean bonds that are really trying to come and see how we can make the markets work for us and finance some of these problems on the ground, but also on the micro level, right, where you're seeing this with the consumer awareness has been so amazing. Where I think someone did a survey even when Brexit was happening in the UK, and people rated plastic as a bigger concern to them than even Brexit, which goes to show kind of how much people care about the environment and care about plastic, care about climate change and all of that. And you see that in individual action. I see someone put in the chat as well, Rogers, about kind of, using cardboard and what you can do at the micro levels. Exactly. There's, I think, just a lot of room for optimism. So in terms of the planet itself, I'm optimistic. In terms of repurpose, for us, our big vision is to kind of keep expanding this ecosystem. And plastic was the first step, but beyond plastic, now we're getting into kind of systems. We're just actually putting out the first plastic neutral protocol early next year, and we're creating a systems change fund where we're saying that a percentage of every plastic credit will go into one fund where we would be selecting these amazing kind of plastic substitutes that are coming up in the market that right now, unfortunately, are not mainstream and are not good alternatives, but can become good alternatives to plastic in the future, and kind of, incubating them and funding them and hoping that they scale up. So the system change fund is something we're working on, and various levels around kind of industry stewardship around the space as well. So the next year for us is really just kind of, making sure that the industry moves in the right direction, and then kind of these big waves are made towards a common cause, and getting kind of stakeholder buy-in and so on. And then the long-term vision for us is really going beyond plastic, because ultimately, if you remember what I was talking about before, our goal is to make impact accessible. And right now we're making plastic kind of solutions to plastic waste accessible, but there are so many other underfunded, overlooked SDGs and impact areas out there. So it's really kind of slowly expanding out to those as well, and eventually kind of becoming a space for planet positivity, right, where you can not, it's beyond plastic neutral, it's planet positive, and that's kind of the big long-term vision.
I love that vision. Keep at it, chase the vision, and everything else will follow. There are some questions in the chat bar, and my arms are getting tired there, everybody, and that's watching on Instagram. Thank you so much. Do you want to, I'll go through these questions and then kind of ask you. We'll stay some organized. Brent Gearson, he left, but I think you touched on that, Svanika, about education. While brands can choose to pursue plastic conscious policies, customers need to understand the value prop in order to vote with their wallets. How do you think brands can conquer customer education opportunity? You touched on that, right? So more education, if even the brands that you support, and you're a consumer of those brands, be discerning where your money goes. I think part of Medicine Box's big philosophy is also, we share that similarity with rePurpose, is it's not about profits, it's about the planet first, people next. They kind of interchange, and then profits. So being able to make that impact where you're spending your money. Rogers, micro level, always ask for boxes at the grocery store, and repurpose the store's waste. I always ask for boxes whenever I can. Cardboard is incredibly renewable, made from recycled or waste byproduct material. You can use it as weed block in your garden. I know I painted houses when I was a kid with my dad, and we used cardboard for like drop cloths. Um, Another one of our partners there, QualScore. Good to see you, man. Um, Way to go, Medicine Box. This is great. You rock, Svanika. Fascinating, and I support you. Are there any questions from Instagram world? If anyone was able to hear there, we were just doing the tech. Oh, Brent's still there. Any other questions? Fire away.
Maybe, yeah, maybe while we wait for questions, I can maybe touch a little bit on Brent's question as well. I
Yeah.
think it is network effects, and I think you're totally right, Brent, in the sense that there is a lot of I we've heard this so many times of fake news, right? But like there's a lot of misinformation out there about plastic, about the environment, and then kind of sometimes it's also kind of limited information where sometimes people just think all plastic is made equal, right? All plastic equals bad. But even within that, there's so many layers to it, right? Is it recyclable? Is it recycled? Is it post-consumer recycled? Is it a monomer? Is it a polymer? And I think it is a little bit unrealistic to ask consumers to just know all of this by themselves. So I do think brands are able to do a lot. And these kinds of, I think, presentations, these kinds of webinars are a great way to do it. I think Brian was putting this on Instagram Live, and that's a great way to kind of, just get the word out through conversation, right? Because I can talk about this to one person, but a brand can talk about it to all of their consumers, right? So that kind of, if I like rePurpose works with one medicine box has then a few thousand more people that are able to kind of educate themselves because of what they're doing. And that kind of network effect led by the brand, I think is really, really important here as well. And just, yeah, that the brand taking the initiative, the business taking the initiative to be transparent and genuine about their sustainability journey, I think goes a long, long way.
Love that. And this is coming from Emma Marks. Great question. One that I was subtly touching on in the presentation. But can you talk a little more about the social impact livelihoods aspect of rePurpose? I'm curious to hear about how you quantify and measure the social impact in addition to the environmental impact. Great question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I love talking about it. I love talking about all things impact. So in terms of social impact, it looks a little bit different from project to project, right? Some projects are easier because you're just saying kind of these are the number of people that got hired, right? These are the number of jobs that were created by the infrastructure we're creating on the ground. But in all of the projects that we work with, a lot of the work that exists right now, especially in the global south, is informal in nature. And so one of the biggest things that we do is a formalization of the work. And then with formalization, I think comes a lot of different things. You get financial safety nets, you get like stable income month on month, and that stability then leads kind of like to multiple other ripple effects. So I'll give you guys an example. So one of the workers that we worked with a long time back was like one of the informal workers, was scraping by, everything was good, and then suddenly he was in a landfill, and then when the trucks come in and drop the waste, all the workers rush because they want to get the high quality waste first, and so everybody's running towards it to get the first one, and his leg got stuck underneath the truck's tires, and then so he lost a leg, and then suddenly now this entire family of a few children, and then the mother, they have no form of livelihood, and they were on the streets, right? And that's it. It was almost kind of like now they're stuck in this kind of cyclical poverty. And so then his kids started working in the same landfill because they had no other alternative. And then you start moving from place to place. The kids don't end up going to school because you don't know where to kind of like focus your efforts. So once you do today here, and then maybe they drive you away, and then you go do it somewhere else, and so you don't go to school. And there's a lot of, I think, related effects there. So when we talk about formalization, there's so much good that can come out of that formalization, because you get health insurance, you get safety nets if something happens. In the first case, you're never having people who are running after trucks in landfills, right? It's all safe. You have these kind of safeguards that get put in place, and you have stable wages where every month I'm going to get this livable wage from this organization that I'm working with. And then so many of our workers, because they had that stability, then were able to kind of go and enroll their kids in school. And for the first time, their kids start going to school, right? And then we also kind of enforce financial inclusion, which is really just kind of this idea that a lot of the workers that that we work with, because they're informal, they've never even had like ID cards, right? And so they've not had kind of the social security equivalent of whichever country they work in, and they've never banked, and they've never had kind of any that sort of like financial inclusion either. And so we enforce that and then create bank accounts and get them IDs, and then now they're able to kind of avail of government benefits and then kind of all the social security benefits that come with that. So I guess in formalization is a kind of wide topic, and the effects of it kind of go beyond just kind of small things like I guess, yeah, being saying things like, okay, 3 jobs were created, right? Yeah, you can create jobs, but you can also formalize a lot of different jobs. So that's one of the big things that we do focus on, which is just kind of like making sure that the work is happening in an ethical manner. So you're not just kind of having an environmentally viable supply chain, but an ethical one as well at that.
Great answer. Thank you. It's astonishing to think the effect that trash has on the world, so everyone that's listening, my mind just goes to, it all starts with just one piece of trash. Another great question coming from Alan Edney. Are your plastic removal methodologies also able to be used by other organizations looking to do similar work, or are they proprietary to rePurpose? If they are proprietary, are there any plans to make them more accessible, like carbon credit methodologies going forward?
Yeah, I think that those two things are slightly different. The plastic credit methodology, and the carbon credit methodology is different to kind of the intervention on the ground itself. And I'm a big believer that impact shouldn't be proprietary, right? Impact shouldn't be gated. Impact should be as open source as possible. And so all the interventions that we run on the ground, every single idea, innovation, waste management, circular innovation, whatever we work with, anybody can replicate it, right? And then we're more than happy to kind of share that knowledge and get more people participating in it, because you don't want to gate something good. You want to spread something good. And then so that's on that piece of it. The second piece was on the credit methodology, right? Like this is the idea of like, how do you create credit, how do you measure credits, and how do you kind of verify and audit, and then those, that's more on the process side of it, of like kind of quantifying plastic credits. And we are actually working on that. So you're right in the sense that carbon credits have like these 2-3 big standards, right? So you have the gold standard for carbon credit, you have the VCS, the verified carbon standard. And so now it's a great question, because interestingly, we are working with the nonprofit Vera, who created the VCS, the verified carbon standard for carbon credits, to create the world's first plastic credit accounting methodology. So that's actually something we've been working on for the better part of this year. And it's out for public consultation now, and we're publishing it early next year. So it's kind of a joint initiative with Danone, Tetra Pak, South Pole, Vera, like multiple different stakeholders in these in the space. And we've come together to write exactly this, right? This methodology, so that plastic credits now have one international kind of global accreditation, where we're essentially applying the methodologies that we follow on the ground to measure additionality, baselines, verify these things, and then applying them to the global scale, so that then anybody can kind of come in and say, hey, I can replicate that, and now I will be able to produce plastic credits as well. Because again, you don't want to gate something good, right? So that is something that will be published early next year. If anybody wants to check it out, do let me know. I can give you, I'll check if it's out for public consultation, and I can give you some access to that as well.
Thank you so much. I like that. Something good shouldn't be gated. I'm just pulling out all the little morsels. I'm like, I'm repurposing your transcription here in my head. That's exactly the answer I wanted to hear! Exclamation point, smiley face. What's up, Sam? How you doing, man? Good to see you. We have about 6 minutes left. If anyone wants to jump in, questions for Svanika or myself with Medicine Box, but this was more about rePurpose. I really wanted to get that message out there, drum up some more ideas, collaborations, and even some business, because I'm super passionate, not a just about what Medicine Box is doing, but the whole cannabis hemp industry as a whole, making impact in not only in my local community here in Lake Tahoe, California, but a much wider impact throughout California, the cannabis industry, and then globally. And I think it's astonishing, and we're super grateful to be collaborating with such a wonderful organization and someone at the helm that is doing fantastic. It makes me cry, just taking such a massive undertaking and making it work. It's pretty awesome. It's really awesome. So thank you, Svanika. Any other questions? If not, I'm going to ask her one more.
Hey, John, my chat isn't working. I have a real brief question.
This is Brian. John
sorry.
John's a teammate using his Zoom. So
this is Michael Lamb from Medicus. Anyway, I was curious what your thoughts were for solutions in the heavily packaged cannabis industry for either like coconut resin plastic or other types of bio resin plastic that we can start to import and use instead of the typical, carbon-based plastics, and try to be a leader in the industry with such an intense packaging of our product. What are you seeing as substitutes? Thanks.
That's a great question, Michael.
Yeah, it's definitely a great question. And I think it kind of is a complicated answer, and I feel like my answer to everything is always it depends. But in this case, it does depend, and I think we're seeing some amazing solutions coming out there. But it really is, I think, thinking about it holistically a little bit, because at the same time we are seeing solutions that compostable, for example, biodegradable is different from compostable, right? And when you have something like that's biodegradable, you also want to see if something is like biodegradable in like 2 months, or is it biodegradable in 10 years, right? And those are kind of different things to think about as well. So I'll give you an example to kind of show what I mean. So we have all of these things that are like compostable plastics that are coming out, right? But if you read the fine print, it would talk about how it's compostable only in industrial composting facilities, which means that your local waste management provider, your municipal waste management provider, wherever the product is being sold, needs to have a industrial composting facility, which in the United States the majority don't. And that's the same for like anywhere, right? Like it's kind of like still it's not there. And so what happens is when it's compostable, it's oftentimes not recyclable. So if you switch from something that used to be recyclable into compostable, it used to be recycled, but now it isn't getting composted because your waste management provider doesn't have a facility, so it's getting landfilled, or it's getting kind of leaked out into the environment, right? And that's kind of like a unforeseen consequence of kind of the switch that you're making. So the reason my answers always depends is kind of really kind of look at the holistic life cycle of these switches, because there's always going to be kind of buzzwords around there of like biodegradable and compostable and all of these different things. But you definitely want to be kind of like mindful of what exactly is the material in it and what exactly is happening at the end of life. Because end of life does I think have a huge, it's not just about the origins, it's also about the end of life, right? So it's both, you consider both. Yes, it's great not to use oil and it's not to use, like virgin plastic, but at the same time, you also do consider end of life as well. So yeah, I don't know if that's exactly the kind of answer we're looking for, but it really, there's a lot of awesome solutions out there. And I think definitely encourage everybody to just be holistic and thoughtful about these different things that are coming out.
That brought me to a good point. When I was looking for the outer packaging that goes around our tincture bottles, I was going through, do I want, it was either 100% recyclable, but it wasn't made from post-consumer waste. And then it was post-consumer waste, but it's not all the way recyclable. So I went through hell to find a 100% compostable bag right here. And this is the outer bag that the bottles go in. And I put soil in it, and I propagated some plants and poked holes in it. It's like a clone bag for anyone that works in the cannabis industry. And then I'll just plop it right down in some soil in a larger pot and let these plants go. But that was kind of the thoughtful approach that I took there. But that's a little bit about what Svanika was saying. It's kind of like, do your research, figure out, kind of where, of course, costs come into play, minimum order quantities, but really it's like, what type of impact you want to make. And Roast Star Packaging, they're in Wisconsin, I believe, somewhere in the Midwest. They were very gracious to get me a MOQ of only 1,000 units on the compostable packaging. There was a lot of negotiation there. So anyway, anyone else with questions? It's 2 p.m. I'm really astonished that so many of you have hung out. We're going to have this recorded. Alana, our Medicine Box team member, will send the recording out. Why not? If you want to share it with other people, content is queen and king, and get it out there. And our next slide here is how to contact rePurpose, and a little bit of closing from Medicine Box. So 50%, we're offering 50% off in the Medicine Box shopping site at www.medicineboxwellness.com. We extended our Black Friday, Cyber Monday, talk about consumerism. Instead of doing it one day, we wanted to do it for the whole month. And, why not just continue right through December? And remember that every unit you buy from Medicine Box, 1 SKU, 2 SKUs, 3 SKUs, there's a multiplier of 1 pound of plastic that gets removed from Mother Earth. So not only are you saving 50%, you are also doing good for the environment. If anyone's interested in getting involved with Medicine Box, which means you're also involved with rePurpose, we have an amazing affiliate program, a Wellness Muse program, that is building quite a nice community around the brand. I think we are 40 plus and growing right now, and you can contact Alana there at alana@medicineboxwellness.com. And then we have hello@repurpose.global. So that's how you find us. And thank you very much. Thank you much for the presentation, and everyone that stuck around in the middle of the day here, midweek. I salute you. Remember, it starts with 1 pound of trash. Be aware if you're walking outside, especially in nature or even in the city, just pick the trash up and put it away. Maybe someone else will buy a Medicine Box product, and that pound of trash goes to making an impact. So, Svanika, do you have any other burning desires or last words? Progress, not perfection, everybody.
Yep, those are great last words. Thank you so much, Brian, for having me on. I really enjoyed this. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around. Appreciate all the interest and the enthusiasm. As you see on the screen, our website is rePurpose.global. For businesses out there, it's business.repurpose.global, and you can also just email us at hello@repurpose.global. So looking forward to meeting some of you guys in the coming weeks. And in the meantime, happy holidays. We're getting into the festive part of the year.
Yes, we are. I'm putting my phone here because I'm taking a photo of this comment. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. I'm looking forward to hearing from you all. Svanika, good to see you again. Enjoy Toronto. Tell the team hello. And remember, if you're ever in Lake Tahoe or coming to California, let me know.
I most certainly will for some paddleboarding. I've actually never paddleboarded.
Paddleboarding, skiing, walking in nature, so much to do. So, thanks,
yeah.
Jay.
Thank you, Alana. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Good to see everybody.
It's awesome.
Bye.
Yeah.
Sam, I took a photo of your comment just so I have it. Thanks.
Yeah, much love, man.
Good to see you, man.